Hello, my name is Tony, and today I'm going to be revisiting the archaic cinematic experience of the theme double bill. I'm focusing on two British films from 1971, Revenge and Assault, both of which I saw at the old Market Hall Cinema in the early 70s. In preparation for this video and through the wonder of digital technology, I rewatched these two unrepentant potboilers back to back in the relative comfort of my home. I was able to replicate the darkness of the cinema by turning down the lights. With more time and a little more effort, I'm sure I could have replicated the fetid stench of the bogs and the heady ambience of stale cigarette smoke and rotting vegetables. However, I restrained myself at just the use of the dimmer switch. The double bill had been a cinema staple since forever. Usually there was a main feature and a B or support flick, just like they were A and B sides to vinyl singles. This meant you got to see two movies for the price of one. Certain exceptions were the longer, more epic movies like Gone with the Wind, Ben-Hur, Lawrence of Arabia, Zulu, Sound of Music. Instead of a support feature, halfway through you got this. It allowed the opportunity for the emptying of bladder or bowel or both, and the chance to get some Kiora, ice cream, hot dogs or confectionery. It also gave the projectionist the time to change reels. For those of you too young to know what the hell I'm talking about, I don't intend to explain further. Look it up or ask your grandfather or some alternative coffin dodger. Eventually, with the arrival of blockbusters like Jaws and Star Wars, the concept of the double bill gradually began to be phased out. By the time the 80s rolled around, it was rare, the exception rather than the rule. Hardly see it at all these days. One film and one film only. That's all you get, peasants. Some double bills hosted films that were equals, like a double A-sided single. Again, look it up or risk interaction with an elderly person, painful as that may be. There was no main feature in some cases, just two flicks that were on a par, like the subjects of this video, Revenge and Assault. Producer Peter Rogers was best known for the Carry On series of British comedy films. Over time, the formula for these had developed from initial inception in the 50s to become well established, and was still drawing decent box office by the early 70s. Lavatorial humour, sexual innuendo, double entendres, slapstick shenanigans, all delivered by an ensemble cast. Shot on a low budget, with a fast turnaround and good financial returns. This is my favourite Carry On gag from a later entry, Carry On Behind. What? Well, it makes me laugh. You can please your bloody selves. Anyway, in the early 70s, Rogers branched out a bit and produced 4 serious feature films distributed by the Rank organisation. Quest for Love, a science fiction movie with Joan Collins, All Cops Are, a crime thriller with Martin Potter, and 2 psychological horror thrillers, Revenge and Assault. And it's the latter pairing that washed up as a themed double bill at the Market Hall. Looked like a good proposition to me at the time, from the poster anyway, so I went and I saw. This is how it goes. Revenge is a squalid little opus with Joan Collins and James Booth as Carol and Jim, who own and run a down-at-heel pub. Jim has 2 kids by a previous marriage, Lee and Jill. Lee is in his late teens or early 20s, and Jill is in school. Both Jim and Carol are struggling with grief since the abduction, rape and murder of their daughter Jenny. Jim's friend Harry, Ray Barrett, has lost a daughter in similar circumstances. The prime suspect is Seeley, played by a grubby Kenneth Griffith, a reclusive weirdo who lingers outside the primary school gates. There isn't any conclusive evidence against him, but his national international health glasses, shabby suit and tie, suspicious carrier bag, and shifty furtive behaviour just screams creepy pedo child killer. Supported by Harry and Lee, Jim kidnaps Seeley and imprisons him in the pub cellar with the aim of beating and torturing a confession out of him. Events then spiral out of control, relationships disintegrate, and doubt increases that the man they have incarcerated and hammered to a pulp may not be the guilty party. Add to this the suspicions of the police, who unsurprisingly notice Seeley's gone missing, and the fact that Joni embarks on an adulterous pseudo-incestuous sexual relationship with young Lee, and you know it ain't going to end well. And it sure doesn't. Things get all histrionic, violent, shouty, fighty and stabby as the film draws to a relentlessly grim conclusion. Now, Britain in the early 70s was still raw and reeling from the then unparalleled 60s case of Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, a gruesome twosome of sadistic sexual perverts who tortured, sexually abused and murdered children in the vicinity of the Yorkshire moors. The Moors murderers, as they became known, were quite rightly national pariahs and hate figures. By the 70s, they still loomed large in the media and collective public consciousness. Paedophiles and child murder were and are deeply sensitive subjects and a tough call to frame as the basis for entertainment in any form. It would be easy to misjudge and represent in a tasteless and exploitative way. However, Revenge, wisely I feel, doesn't focus on the act itself, but rather the aftermath. It looks at how people who have experienced the unimaginable might behave and react in such circumstances, and how their own humanity may become compromised. When I first saw it as a youngster, I had enough about me to register how such events could push ordinary people to the limit, and Jim's actions seemed a reasonably understandable parental response. How would you feel and what would you do? Revenge poses that provocative and uncomfortable question. Director Sidney Hayers and screenwriter John Cruise sort of get it right, but only up to a point. Joni Collins was 38 when this film was made. Her age-inappropriate sexual relationship with her teenage or early 20s stepson Lee feels a bit off, especially a scene where they indulge in rough sex in front of the incapacitated Seeley. I'm uncertain of how the director and writer wanted this to be perceived, what they were trying to say in the context of the film. I mean, don't get me wrong, Joni looked great here, and the opportunity to strip her down to her underwear for a violent confrontation towards the end also probably seemed like a good idea when the film was being shot. I'm not complaining as such. But again, gratuitous titillation, pardon that turn of phrase, does seem a little misplaced considering the subject matter. Just saying. Across the board, the acting is okay. Kenneth Griffith steals it with his portrayal of Seeley. Pathetic, snivelling, by turns repellent as a potential child murderer, or sympathetic as a possibly innocent victim. Griffith evokes an unsettling duality in his characterization. Despite the beatings and abuse, he resolutely refuses to confess. So did he, or didn't he? Not for me to say. In summation, it is what it is, a cheaply made B-movie exploring, albeit over-dramatically, a difficult and challenging subject. It's not a particularly likeable film, and few of the characters in it are very likeable either. It's very much of its time, and mirrors those times quite atmospherically, a minor piece of genre cinema, and for me a worthwhile time capsule. I'm not sure what was wrong with the original title, Revenge, but when this was released in the States in 1976, it was called Inn of the Frightened People. What a fucking awful title. Prompted me to suggest an alternative UK title, Pub of the PAEDO Punchers. What do you think? Even worse, when it was released on video in the US, it was retitled again as Terror from Under the House. Bet those expecting a documentary about property subsidence were sorely disappointed. On to Assault. Same director and screenwriter as Revenge, Hayers and Cruise. This torrid sliver of genre cinema is a pacier and far more lurid tale of schoolgirl rape and murder, from kitchen sink horror to giallo impersonator. A maniac is on the loose, well, aren't they always, and is targeting the pink miniskirt wearing pupils of an all-girls school. First victim, Tessa, Leslie Ann Down, is assaulted, see where they got the title? Under a buzzing electricity pylon. The pylon motif crops up a lot. There's a reason for this. She lives to tell the tale, only she can't because she's in a state of catatonic shock. Now, if a pink miniskirt wearing schoolgirl gets raped and brutalized in the nearby woods, what's the only logical thing to do if you were another pink miniskirt wearing schoolgirl? That's right, get into them thar woods pronto for your very own rapist encounter. When the next one is noted to be missing, the art class mistress Julie, Susie Kendall, takes some other rape-bait students out in her Morris Minor Traveller, that's a car, to search for the missing girl. As you would. It all goes wrong. By now the girl has been murdered and Julie catches sight of the perp through the rear window of her vehicle. To her, he looks like the devil. This is simply because he's been caught in the red taillights and is wearing glasses which reflect the red glow. Frankly, he looks nothing like any manifestation of old Nick I can imagine. Her artist impression looks like this. A budding Picasso, and no mistake, bears little resemblance to anything seen elsewhere in the movie and largely useless as a police sketch for a wanted poster. However, this didn't stop the US distributors retitling the film In the Devil's Garden and Satan's Playthings and Tower of Terror. For fuck's sake, what is the matter with you people? From here on in, it's a case of guess the killer from a cast list of likely suspects. Dr. Lomax, who treats Tessa and creeps after Julie, the CD reporter who harasses Julie and is out to sensationalize and sell her story, the chief superintendent on the case, the headmistress's thigh-groping husband, Dr. Lomax's nice colleague, one of two peeping toms, possibly even the headmistress, who looks a bit like a rapist in drag. Take your pick. I like this more than Revenge. It's unself-consciously batty and senseless, but also fairly good fun in a faintly guilty sense. There are broad giallo flourishes, handheld point-of-view camera shots, and a lurid colour scheme imposed on certain scenes. The rape sequences are not explicit nor revealing, but are shot in such a way, using certain camera angles, that dupe you into thinking they are. Hitchcock? Shower? Anyone? There is a truly hilarious scene where a young David Essex gets blown up in a pharmacy due to using his lighter. There's a gas leak that his sense of smell doesn't allow him, or anyone else, to detect. He plays a biker who stops off there in the dead of night to buy some tissues for his girlfriend's nosebleed. Yeah, fucking ludicrous. This scene alone was worth the price of admission.
Oh, what a circus!
A thing of great beauty. Rock on. Okay, spoiler! The climax sees the culprit unmasked and on the run through the woods. To make his escape from the fuzz, he climbs to the top of the pylon. Told you there was a reason for it. Why you would do that is anyone's guess, unless you had an escape helicopter en route. He doesn't, by the way. What he does have is a case of his luck running out. He touches the wrong bit of the pylon and gets promptly electrocuted and incinerated. Unlike Jason, Freddy or Michael Myers, he ain't coming back to life. It's the end, the last roundup for Rapey. Susie Kendall was a luminously gorgeous young actress back then. She is the only decent, empathetic human being here really, as the men are all weirdos and creeps to greater or lesser degrees. So, despite the clearly exploitational and de facto sexist nature of the film, is there some sort of pro-feminist message buried in there somewhere? All men are potential rapists and not to be trusted perhaps? Something cliched like that. Do I recommend you watch these films? Well, yeah, I do, with certain reservations. The main caveats are, if you are on the lookout for cheaply made examples of early 70s British attempts at thriller, horror genre movies, these two will fit the bill nicely. If you like vintage flicks which effectively encapsulate the times in which they were made, then again, they measure up well enough. Other than that, neither are anywhere near grade A cinematic artistry or popcorn blockbuster territory or politically correct in any modern sense. So if any of that is closer to your bag, steer clear. I understand both are now available on Blu-ray. Guess someone thinks there is an audience out there somewhere. Thank you for your time and attention. Always appreciated. If you have enjoyed on any level, please consider liking and or subscribing. Here's a song called Not Off.
You danced in a cage on a postage stamp stage, in the ticker tape glitter and lens flare. Boots and groovy hats on those real cool cats. You were the decorative fluff, posing up there. How could you know at the end of the show, in this prestigious and honorable venue, the way it would go was such a harsh blow, to find you a part of the menu. The way it feels you'll never be clean again. The way it feels not that carefree teen again. The way it feels violated and sordid. Wouldn't you know that part was never recorded? A night night of 1,000 stars, mini skirts and padded bras, aphrodisiac of fame by association. Innocents died of death that night, fear and shame in the morning light. What did you do to deserve such degradation?
If I said you had a body, would you hold it against me? I'm waiting.
You are not alone in the studio danger zone, where the clouds of blue Spartos would linger. Gold bracelets on the wrist, how could any kid resist the halitosis DJ with nicotine fingers? It never got better, rough hands up your sweater, cigar-laden breath, hard and violent. If you want a new dress and you know what's best, you better wise up and stay silent. The way it feels, you'll never be clean again. The way it feels, not that carefree teen again. The way it feels, violated and sordid. Wouldn't you know that part was never recorded? A night of 1,000 stars, mini skirts and padded bras, aphrodisiac of fame by association. Innocents died of death that night, fear and shame in the morning light. No one on earth deserves such degradation. Alright!
Got a gun on you. Glad to see you.
He says it's not half as bad as you think. You're feeling sick and suicidal, now we start. So can the crying and have another drink. You're in the past now, like this week's Talk of the Pops. No! Feels you'll never be clean again. The way it feels, not that carefree teen again. The way it feels, violated and sordid. Wouldn't you know that part was never recorded?
If I said you had a body, would you hold it against me? I'm waiting. Got a gun on you. Glad to see you. I'll tell you what, Thingo, and kisses on the bottom of my pass. Do you know what, Pete? Can I have my fluff badge?